Let's talk about legal news with Eborn's greatest writs, and Andrew Eborn, Futurist barrister and broadcaster, joins us now. Hello.
Hello, it's an absolute delight to join you. And what I loved listening to you earlier is on a sugly peg. And I think it was isn't that wonderful? When I first heard it, I thought he was saying a sugary peg, which I thought means you basically need to go and see a dentist to get it filled. But no, it is sugly, and it's that wonderful old Scottish English, so meaning that it's a little bit insecure.
A bit insecure, yeah. A sugary peg. Love it. Right. You're not insecure at all, so let's talk about...
I thought it's a lovely segue, isn't it? Because with all sorts of glorious things happening in the legal world, not least our poster boy for every legal action ever, good old Donald Trump, who's at the moment facing a big defamation case in New York. Now, you might remember last year, Jean Carroll, she brought a trial, civil trial, saying that she was sexually abused by Trump in the 1990s, and she won that. And basically what happened, she said that the comments that Trump made, saying that she's just made the whole thing up, were defamatory. And the judge in that particular case ruled, yes, that's right. So it has now gone to this New York court to determine, well, how much money is she entitled to? And she's basically seeking $10 million, which is more than she got at the last trial, which is $5 million, because she says Trump is basically, he is made this whilst he was president. And as he was president, it had even more damaging effects than it did last time. But what's happened, Petrie, is breaking news is the case in New York, which is supposed to be happening as we speak, has just been postponed because of a sick juror. So that particular sick juror is unwell as they're headed to court this morning. And also Trump's lawyer thinks they might have caught COVID from their parents.
Convenient, isn't it?
Hey, it is extraordinary, isn't it? But you look at just
convenient when you
things,
think that Trump has been applying to have these cases, all of them, delayed and kicked into the long grass because it's effect. He thought it might have some effect on the caucuses and the primaries. So it's just interesting to me to see that there is a delay now caused by illness. So, I'm just cynical. Cynical.
Well, it's fun to be cynical sometimes, isn't it? But I mean, Donald Trump's got a rally in New Hampshire tonight ahead of the state's primary on Tuesday. As you know, he's campaigning to win the Republican presidential nomination, and he's doing pretty well at the moment. He won, as we predicted, big win in Iowa. And what he's a master at doing is basically telling everybody, look, they're all after me. It's all a massive witch hunt, and the more that these people throw at him, the more his popularity.
Oh, it's extraordinary. He is miraculous. Look, whether you love him or hate him, you've got to admit this guy is some sort of magic trick. But there's no doubt about this defamation. There is no doubt that he defamed her. I mean, I remember some of the things he was saying about her. I wouldn't touch her anyway, even though she looked identical to his wife at the time. All of these things. And he made some very disparaging comments about her. So she's definitely got a defamation case against him. And he does need to learn to stop slagging people off.
Well, this is the thing. So the judge has already ruled. I mean, he may appeal it, but the judge has already ruled that Trump's statements were defamatory. Yeah. And all that the jury has to decide at this much is how much. Yeah, and that's basically it. So it's a question of quantum. But Trump is facing 91 felony counts across 2 state courts and 2 different federal districts, all of which could, some of which could potentially produce a prison sentence. So it is quite an extraordinary, and somebody needs to sell the film rights to it later on.
Oh my gosh! But he can serve as president in an orange suit. So
isn't that extraordinary?
And it matches skin.
I was just going to say, Petrie, you beat me to it.
It'll be colour coded. It'll be lovely.
I love it.
I bet the fact that he can is extraordinary because the reason is because it isn't in the Constitution that he can't.
Yes. Yeah.
So the absence of a line saying you can't serve from in prison means he can serve from in prison. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. It is quite extraordinary,
isn't it?
We love it.
Right. Current legal restrictions on access to records is hampering care. This is an odd one.
Well, I'll tell you what's happening. In the royals at the moment, there's all sorts of disclosing their health. We've had, obviously, the Princess of Wales is right next door to me. I'm in Regent's Park. She's at the London Clinic. So I see all the police every time I pop to my home. So she's over there. She's talked publicly, or they've talked publicly about that. King Charles has talked even more publicly about what's happening with his side and the prostate reduction that he's going to have very shortly.
Which is really good of him to do that. Very personal, but to get other men to go and do it. I think that's really, really decent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've had Fergie, who's just come back into public life, talking about her cancer.
Yeah.
Exactly. So all credit to them. What this basically is at the moment, the more we can share information, the more that basically you can prevent. And prevention is much better than cure. But the law at the moment means that if you've got an illness in your family, there's no obligation on you to disclose that illness to other family members, even though it might benefit them. And this is particularly true or relevant, if you like, for cancer. And there's been a big campaign at the moment. So somebody called Ellis Rich, and he's got Caroline's Law. He lost his daughter very, very young, who had this BCRA gene,
the
which was
BRCA
defective.
gene, yeah.
The BRCA gene, exactly. And you might basically, and what happens is most women face about a 12.5% breast cancer risk. But if you've got this particular BRCA gene, then it massively increases to 60 to 90%.
And it goes down the female line, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is, you're bang on, and you're absolutely all over this story, Petrie. So the point is this, is that if there's no obligation on the family members to disclose this, it means that other family members have an increased risk because they could get it earlier if they know they can get tested earlier and so on and so forth. So what the campaign is basically to look at empowering doctors to have that information and to share that information so that they can turn around and say, look, hang on, you've got a heightened risk here. We're going to test you earlier because prevention is better than cure. And there's a couple of
organisations
organisations
I think I have a problem with that. I do have a problem with that. Listen, I understand that people, it's like in the prostate cancer, if your grandfather died of you ought to go and be checked. But there is privacy. And there is.
You're absolutely.
And I have a real
there?
issue with somebody else being able to decide what is private about you and what isn't.
Well, I think what's interesting, Patrick, and you don't have to disclose where it came from. So basically, I'm bang on about AI every single time, but it's empowering people. We're discovering seismic changes in the medical profession. Even in the papers tomorrow, they're talking about, a blood test that will detect Alzheimer's 10 to 15 years before a patient shows symptoms, could be screened for all over 50. So there's great news every day. Information is power. But if the doctors have the information and they don't have to disclose where it came from, and basically everything is connected, then they can do this without having to put the pressure on the individual who's obviously a victim themselves and suffering in that particular case. So it's trying to empower the doctors in the same way as if all the doctors have access to the best information in the world through these AI developments and various other things. It means that they can treat people in a much better way, which has got to be good. And Starmer, I love him or hate him, one of the policies that he spoke about in the last few days is basically joining up the NHS so they've got access to all sorts of information because that information at the moment is disjointed and people are missing things.
They are, but the downside of that, of course, is that there are people who may not want to reveal things to doctors for fear that will be shared. And I think that is a very real problem. If you can't trust your doctor, and you're saying that it'll be, anonymous, but we've heard about the anonymising records before, and it's absolute BS. They are not anonymised, not to any real degree, not to the degree that even I couldn't find out who the original person was. I don't trust the system. I don't trust the government. I don't trust them with joining up information like that.
Yeah, I understand
it's not
that. And that's
truly
why
anonymous.
It's got to be handled very, very carefully. But you've got to weigh that up. And as I say, you've got to make sure there's a balance. If you can save lives, is it worth it? And that's got to be the question. If people really understand the risks by not disclosing it, I mean, people worry.
Well, then there must be a reason they're not disclosing. I just have a real problem with the privacy levels. We're all terrified into giving away more and more of ourselves. Oh, if you don't do this, someone could die. If you do that, and we're being scared into revealing more and more about ourselves into systems that are vast, that are shared. Who do you know? Do we know that they're not going to be shared with an insurance company down the road, which means that your family has a history of the BRCA gene and you can't get insurance for your entire family, men and women, down the ages. We don't know what they're going to do with it. And you know as well as I do that you cannot trust organisations with data. We can't.
Data is power, and you're absolutely right. That's the
I don't
sort of
trust
balance,
them.
But I think these are the arguments. This is the debate, and that's what you've got to work out. Is it worth somebody's life to withhold this information, or is that sort of, can you sacrifice privacy on that basis? But don't put the obligation on the patient.
Yeah, but then you sacrifice that information to that person if you're a family member. You don't need to sacrifice it to the entire medical profession.
Yeah, well, it depends on who you put the pressure on to disclose this. And I think you're right. Doctors have a duty of care anyway, and
but
they have a duty of privacy.
They also have a duty of privacy. The relationship between a patient and their doctor is supposed to be absolutely sacred, and that is absolutely supposed to be why we can go and tell them about issues that we might have that we wouldn't tell anyone else.
Oh, no, absolutely. But this is but they're merely being empowered to give the best possible treatment to the patients.
They're being empowered to share our data. I don't like it. Anyway, the debate should continue. But you're right. It's a legal issue, and this is what people are looking at. And I think you should absolutely have that thing. The more people are aware of it, the more that they can help decide. But that's what they're seeking, is this change in the law. By all means, have a campaign that says, if you've got the BRCA gene, please inform every female in your family up and down the line. Please, because you could save a life, rather than go to your doctor and the doctor's going to, tell everybody in your family that that's the case. That's the way I would do it, but, call me old-fashioned. Let's just very quickly have a look at French MPs wanting to amend EU's copyright rules to cover generative AI.
Yes, at the moment, copyright law is determined by the laws of each individual country. What it is a bundle of rights given to creators of work. Now, for a lot of countries around the world, where you have artificial intelligence, they're sort of saying, well, there's no human input. And if there's no human input, such as in the States, they say, well, you can't have copyright protection. What happens, it's slightly different in the UK, where basically, as long as it's computer generated, then under the Copyright Act, then you do get protection. What they're trying to do, they're saying there's all sorts of issues we touched on beforehand in the nanoseconds we've got. Obviously, it's copyright in for the works which are being used to feed these machines, and making sure there's a fair and equitable recompense for creators such as yourself, the brilliant artist that is Petrie Hosken, that I always talk about and people should recognise. So you need to make sure there's a fair compensation for them, but also you need to work out, without these remunerations, how are these wonderful creative generative AI systems going to work? Because you need
like the
to
New
be
York
able to
Times
feed
is
the
suing,
machines.
isn't it, for that as well?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's been done without their consent.
Yeah.
It's scraped the internet, and many authors and other copyright owners are doing exactly that. So what we need to do is identify what's an original work, what sort of protection should be given to it. If you use, my personal view is that you should use AI as a co-pilot, because you need certain instructions. Don't just leave the machine to get on with it. You need to be able to guide the machine in the same way as you might use a pen or a typewriter or whatever. This is your new co-pilot, which has got special powers. But you do need to make sure that artists are protected along the way.
Absolutely,
and that's what's being looked at.
Yeah. Obviously, I agree. I completely and utterly agree with that. Andrew Eborn, thank you very much indeed. Andrew Eborn there, futurist, barrister and broadcaster.
On the app, on your mobile, Talk Radio and Talk TV.